pro wrestling fanatics, we got one question for you. What you gonna do when the RBV, Poz, and the power of Hulkamania run wild on you? This is the 10 count special tribute to the one, the only, the immortal, real American Hulk Hogan, the Hulkster, the pride and joy, the icon, the childhood hero of one, Mr. John Poz.
There's no doubt about that. The first real, outside of my dad, of course, the first real, childhood hero that I had was absolutely the immortal Hulk Hogan, the Babe Ruth of wrestling, the god of wrestling, the John Wayne, if you will, of wrestling. Hulk Hogan.
Absolutely. We're trying to stick to the format here. 30 minutes, and Poz and I were talking like, man, how can we give a proper tribute? We're going to give it our absolute best. 10 topics covering the immortal one, Hulk Hogan. Poz, let's dive right into it because, so many memories from the, Hulkamania running wild through the early years of WrestleMania, through our teenage years with WCW, but it goes way back further than that. Let's talk a little bit of life before the bell for one, Mr. Hulk Hogan, before he was the Hulkster.
So interesting that he really did play bass guitar. Like he really was a musician before wrestling. That is the interesting thing, because I know the Metallica stuff kind of gets a little blown out of proportion. And hey, worker's going to work. I don't know if people believe that or not, but old school worker, old school Carney, talking about that. He's playing the bass over at Tootsie's Bar and Grill, according to Roddy Piper when he was a young man. So when you look at it, it's just one of those things where obviously he was a huge wrestling fan. He used to go to the shows. He was a fan of Dusty Rhodes. He's a fan of Superstar Billy Graham. He was a fan of Austin Idol. He kind of took a little bit from each one of those guys and added it to eventually the Hogan persona. But he was a fan, was obviously a big, big dude, and he did play bass guitar before getting into the wrestling business.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Born there in Georgia, it is in very early on. I think after like 1 year of being born, him and his family moved to the Tampa area. And some of his early loves, as you mentioned, man, as a kid, he loved baseball. It was a big time pitcher. She said a bass guitar. She had that desire for that spotlight to entertain the masses, if you will. But, even back then, that love of professional wrestling and drawn to that spotlight, a big fan, as you mentioned, of Dusty Rhodes. And it was Superstar that it was like, man, he's like, I want to be this guy. This is who I want to model myself there. He starts working out. He gets some connections inside of professional wrestling, Poz, and he's off to training. And that's where one of the first big legends with the Hulkster break a leg, brother, when he jumps into the business.
See, the crazy thing, and it's funny, I was told a while ago, obviously before Kevin Sullivan had passed, we were talking about this, and maybe several other wrestlers talked about this with Hiro Matsuda breaking his leg in training. If Hulk doesn't come back, what happens to the business? Where does it go? Where, does it kind of go the way of roller derby? Maybe not, but I don't think it becomes a global phenomenon that it would eventually become. But when that happens, he goes to the training in Florida, he trains with Hiro Matsuda. I know Matsuda's tough trainer. Luger's talked about several guys, Ron Simmons, a bunch of guys have talked about how tough of a trainer he is. But breaking a guy's leg that doesn't know what he's doing in there, huge mistake. Imagine if Hogan didn't come back. Hiro Matsuda would probably be, and it's hard to say, but maybe the biggest idiot ever. Never would have known. But like, if you just think about it, like if you got God's eyes or whatever you're looking at, might have been the dumbest move of all time. I mean, what an idiot! What are you doing here? What a horrible trainer.
Well, the old school mentality, Poz. You're really going to test someone to see how bad they want that. They probably looking at this guy. At this point, still maybe a little overweight, still maybe a little dopey. Okay, he's in a bed. He's doing some other things here. Is he really going to take this serious? Is he just trying to get a rub here from the spotlight? But as you said, the Hulkster breaks that leg day one. As the legend is of training, takes almost an entire year to come back from that. As well, he dabbles in some other things. He was big into the bodybuilding. Where he met some people that introduced him to professional world. So he's helping run a gym at the time. I think, they've got some other business ventures, entertainment venue things going on there. But he does come back into it. And actually, those outside ventures is when he begins a long-time friendship and starts traveling the roads, gets another individual into professional wrestling, starts traveling some of the territories. They go up to Georgia for a few spots, and that is Brutus, who would become Brutus Beefcake. The Boulder brothers make their
Nice. Yes.
splash into the professional wrestling scene.
Kind of love that, and just the loyalty of Hogan. I know they kind of were up and down with the relationship over the years, and really kind of fell out of favor with each other, mostly because Beefcake's wife, but they kind of did make amends and become friends again towards the end of Hulk's life there. Beefcake even said he kind of admits that they weren't buddy, the whole time. He kind of regrets a lot of things he said about Hogan, and that's maybe a different story for a different day. But one of those things, look at the loyalty of Hogan. Not only does he travel the roads with him, then Hogan becomes a huge star, gets him into WWF, gets him into WCW, gets this guy a paycheck until like the year
Main
2000.
pay-per-views
Yeah,
together
main
there
event
at
Starcade,
WCW.
for Christ's sake, yes. So one of those things where look at the loyalty of Hogan. What a good friend, what a good guy, what a good person. He's helping his little buddies, little quote unquote little brother there, the Boulder brothers. He's helping him out all along the way, and obviously was a longtime friend of his forever. So pretty cool of Hogan, just the way he is. I mean, just as everyone should know, or anybody that has heard stories of it, super loyal guy, super to his friends, like to almost to a fault.
Well, I think that will be kind of a running theme through here. The topics here on this episode of the 10 count is those relationships that Hulkster made throughout his career. And I think what's very cool, we look at the early on, from day one, breaking that leg and sticking with it as he continues to grow throughout these territories. Obviously, back then, with a man of his physique, typically build it, 6'7", 6'8", legit over 300 pounds, just a massive mountain of a human being. Thus the name, the Boulder brothers, exactly what he looked like everywhere he went. So a lot of the territories, they naturally kind of pitch him out there. All right, he's going to be a heel. It's a monster heel for our baby faces to overcome. But even early on, that natural charisma, fans could pick up on it.
Oh, no doubt about it. One of those guys that just had it. You know what I mean? Hard to describe. You don't know what it is, but just the aura, the charisma, the look. It's like, man, I don't know who this guy is, but he's somebody. And then obviously, eventually, everybody would eventually find out who he is and know who he is. But at that point, it's like, who is this guy? I don't know who he is, but he's got something about him where I feel like he's somebody.
Well, and there is that big early on success but outside of WWF at the time, globally as well.
Yeah.
But I remember first, really picking up on it, that run in the AWA. And then also, later on learning about the power of Hulkamania itself on a global scale with his tours in Japan. Probably jump into either one of those. I mean, they're both amazing stories, but especially we think of Hulkamania being born with Vince McMahon in the WWF, but brother, it was running wild in the AWA.
Huge business in the AWA. And it's crazy to think that Verne Gagne wouldn't pull the trigger on it. So he had this big feud with Nick Bockwinkel, and they were building up Hulkamania, and he would win the title.
The beginnings of the career-long feud with one Bobby Heenan as well.
Yes. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you're not pulling the trigger, bait and switch. We're going to pretend he's the champion, then we're going to take it away, give the you got to end up pulling the trigger. You can't do that.
That arena was so insane that night.
And right, that Vince is paying attention to this. And it's like, oh my God, like this is the most popular guy in the AWA. He's keeping an eye on all talent that he's going to raid eventually and steal. And who's going to be his mantle? Who's the guy who's going to be the top of the mountain? Who's going to be like the cherry on the top there? And he's looking at Hogan, and he probably can't even believe that Verne Gagne won't pull the trigger and give this guy the title and give him the run and give him the push, because had he done that, who knows, maybe he doesn't go to WWF, maybe he doesn't go to Vince McMahon if he felt the loyalty and the love for Verne Gagne. But it was crazy, he just kept pretending he's the champion. Oh, DQ, this happened, Bockwinkel retains the title, and just kept doing that. And Hulkamania was so over in AWA. It was like, man, if you would have just pulled the trigger, who knows? AWA might still be here today. Who knows?
Again, if you go back, here, I mean, the crowds, they were packing arenas every time Bockwinkel versus Hogan, and we'd get some kind of weirdo finish, a dusty finish where they would take the title back off of Hogan. But that Eye of a Tiger, I mean, those arenas would be absolutely rocking back then. And as you said, they just And Vince is looking at this thing, and he's looking at expansion, and he knows this is the guy. This is the guy that they hitched the wagon to, that house that's going to pull everything forward, which does bring up, that great debate. If Gagne would have seen it, made that move, how could have it forever changed the course, the future at that time of professional wrestling? And we talked about those friendships. We had just mentioned the feud that would be born with Bobby the Brain Heenan. One of the, some of the most iconic images and scenes of professional wrestling start there in AWA. We first see Mean Gene in the Hawkster together. And all the, the great memories that they would share throughout each other's careers. But, it just wasn't about, here in the States and Hulkamania, the birth Hulkamania in the AWA globally, going over to Japan. We talk about that mountain of a man. I mean, here comes the foreign a Godzilla for the fans over in Japan, and such an impact he had over there, Poz.
Man, he was a god in Japan. First up IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. Once you beat Inoki and knock Inoki out, that just obviously raises a lot of eyebrows in Japan, and he just becomes an absolute legend over there with the Axe Bomber. And then, through his time there, eventually later on too, just great matches with Muda. He had some great matches with Fujinami, Tenru, Chono. There's a bunch of great stuff from him in Japan. I know that's like the funny thing is like, whoa, he could really work in Japan. He didn't really need to show it the States, but over there you have to show it. And he kind of showed he was the damn good worker and could do that style, and he could really work. So that's kind of a funny thing with Hogan too. Although there's some great matches.
Hulk was the greatest worker. Hulk is one of the greatest workers on both sides of the globe, but he knew how to adjust for the styles.
Yes.
It wasn't necessarily needed to work, work the Japanese style here in America. So absolutely, I'm not one that buys in to those types of conversations, those arguments. But to be able to have that impact to me, that's simply what makes him so immortal and so in touch, as you said. The earliest form of the IWGP Championship, winning the big tournaments over there, all the classic matches with the top names, and such an incredible draw that he was to make Hulkamania such a global phenomenon that it was. But of course, Poz, for the record books, for what everybody remembers, when that rocket got strapped to him and it just went to new heights and evolved and forever changed the world of professional wrestling. It happens there in '84. He reemerges. Vince's vision is going to unfold in front of our very eyes. This is when Hulkamania truly runs wild. And it is a return because he had those earlier runs in the WWF with Vince Sr. Jr. brings him back, and they strap the rocket to him.
And Vince is forever changed. Hogan obviously forever changed. WWF forever changed. Wrestling forever changed. Became a global phenomenon. He became mainstream. WWF became mainstream. He beats Iron Sheiki Baby January 23rd, 1984. Madison Square Garden, becomes a world champion. And as Gorilla Monsoon infamously says, Hulkamania is here. Just one of the just great moments ever in the history of the wrestling. You could tell the crowd was nuts for him, nuts for it, and you're off the races. Sometimes in wrestling, when you have these like Austin, for instance, beating Michaels at WrestleMania 14, you're off to the races. You feel it, you sense it. It's the NWO, it's like you're off to the races. So Hogan beating Sheik was like kind of just really like the launching pad. I know slamming Andre WrestleMania 3 kind of takes it to another stratosphere, but that was the launching
pad. Introduction of beating Sheiki Baby. He has arrived. Backlund, with the put over. I've talked to him. He's changed his ways. He's ready to represent you, the people. He's a good guy now. But all those iconic moments, and there probably is no greater iconic moment, just not in WWF, WWE history, but all of professional wrestling. It is, the third edition. They finally arrived. I don't care. I'll go with it. 93,000 plus.
Yes.
Up in Detroit, watching around the world. It is Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. That's the moment that really catapults professional wrestling to heights never thought. As you said, just not crossing over into mainstream. They became the it of mainstream there at WrestleMania.
Absolutely just amazing. 93,000 people, set off wrestling before every WWE show today. There's the infamous slam. So it's one of the most iconic moments ever. Love that match. The crowd is nuts. There actually is another footage, which I love that they do, because they unearth this stuff where they just play the one camera and they take out the announcers and you just listen to the crowd. It is so loud. It's way louder than you really realize it is, but just so cool. What a moment. And obviously changed wrestling forever. I mean, you're talking about him beating Shiki, changing him beating Andre. I mean, that just launched it, and then launched Survivor Series and SummerSlam, and then they have to do the Royal Rumble, and then the Saturday Night's main event, which was there, but the big main event versus Andre, which was the rematch, which was seen by 33 million people. Just what a feud.
Well, and then as you talk, all the launching points there, we look at the merchandise, the toys, the pay-per-view, the television, WrestleMania itself. Essentially, Hulk's the headliner for the first 9 of those things.
Yep.
Hogan must pose is the selling point for an entire decade of WrestleMania. That seems absolutely insane. And we're talking about those iconic moments. So many lists there in that early run, his second run there with the company, but to really be the face of the place, to elevate everything. Macho, the battle with Macho, the battle with Warrior, ending the Cold War, taking down Slaughter, and defending America against the Middle East. Just such incredible memories and an impact on professional wrestling. And after that decade there, Poz, times are changing. The company's moving in a different direction. And the Hulkster himself, he decides to go in a different direction. He had dabbled a little bit, dipped his toe into the big screen. I'm not talking about the NWO here, but Hulk goes Hollywood. He had some spots there on television, some Saturday Night Live, some A-Team. Even early on in that transition, ended his first run with Vince Sr. And maybe his most notable role is as Thunderlips in Rocky 3. Poz, your fond memories kind of spanning the broad run, the years that Hulkster had on film and television.
I know some people say, "Oh, the movies weren't that good," but they were what they were. I mean, you know what you're getting. You're not going to get, Oscar-worthy performances here. No Holds Barred is great. What a great movie! Suburban Commando, Mr. Nanny, Thunder in Paradise. I mean, they're all very entertaining, very good stuff. You know what you're getting. Nothing crazy. He wasn't trying to, break the mold here or do anything, too crazy, or wasn't going to put on this great acting performance. It was just pure entertainment. You knew the fan base, what you were going for. I liked all the stuff. The Gremlins 2 cameo is great. So no complaints there or whatever about him in Hollywood. Three Ninjas, I'm fine with. I mean, it is what it is. There's nothing. It's all entertainment.
You look at those early, spots that he's getting to do, and it speaks again to the magnitude, the crossover power and appeal of Hulkamania, of how everybody wanted a piece of the action, and just the cameo spots, what they meant. It really, as we talk about that birth and that charisma that caught fire with the audience, going back to Thunderlips and getting to see him on the big screen there against Rocky when it was so hot, in professional wrestling. You see the boxer versus the pro wrestler. We would see that around the globe at that point. And then to see Hulkster on screen with some of the other larger than life figures. And it was when he was doing a talk show spot with Lou Ferrigno, the Hulk. And someone even had commented like, look at how big he's towering over the actual Hulk. This is the Hulk.
Yeah, he's bigger than
which
Hulk,
kind of dubbed him, the Hulk, and then later we get Hulk Hogan. Quite a great. But it's funny, when he gets into that early '90s, and we do have the action scene, that he is centered around with No Holds Barred. Vince and Hogan putting a lot into that thing, hoping it would launch him. But it's funny that he then runs into kind of a phase in Hollywood where they're taking those '80s muscle men, those hard asses, and putting them in kind of in the funny roles. We got like Kindergarten Cop, where they're doing the buddy flicks and things like that with Arnold and Stallone and all that.
Yep.
Hey, but an early pop here for the show, not the pop of the week here, but an early one. Hey, how can he complain about this?
Mr. Nanny, yes.
Mr. Nanny, you get to see the Hawkster in a tutu doing ballet.
Love it.
Yeah, he said he goes to television with Thunder in Paradise. That was supposed to be, could have been a really big hit for him there. But the ring comes a calling again through a meeting as legend with Ric Flair. He gets a meeting with one Eric Bischoff, and Hulk Hogan signs a deal to go where the big boys play. Shocking. One of the big shocking moments here of his career. He's going to World Championship Wrestling. What did you think when you had first heard this? Your hero leaving the WWF.
I loved it because I wanted to see him back. I wanted him back in wrestling. So immediately I thought WCW was the biggest game in town. As soon as he shows up, I thought they were the major leagues. And I was a lifelong WWF fan. But just to me, he equals money. He equals major leagues. He's the top dog. So wherever he goes is where the big boys play football, but that is where the top guys are, as long as he's there. And Flair, obviously, one of the top guys as well. But to me, that was the first chink in the armor for Vince, where Vince was like, wow, what a terrible businessman. He thought Hulk Hogan was done. That was like, wow, what a dummy. And obviously that almost put him out of business. So obviously that really proved to be true. It's like, wow, who made who here? You know what I mean? If Hogan's going someplace else and they're the number one game in town, Vince not looking too good for a bit there, for a couple of years.
Yeah, it is. It's like, oh my God, this is an immediate game changer. Yeah. WCW, who was always pretty good, but that second tier, but boom. All right, now have they leapfrogged? Are they number one? And you see the floodgates, all those legends that we love that had made Vince in the 80s and early 90s, they're now jumping ship. We have got a game changer in the business here. And the first big payoff. One of the biggest fumbles, of Vince's run there at WrestleMania wasn't giving us Flair and Hogan. Now we're going to get this thing. It was some years later, but there's still that great excitement. When you and Miss Sullivan doing the show, did you guys talk about the early booking? I had heard in an interview at one time that Sullivan even said, though, because they had to go with what Hulk was familiar with. And even though they saw times were changing, it was still, okay, we got to come up with these crazy giant figures to battle Hulkamania. The whole goal to take down Hulkamania, to have Hogan rise up to once again be victorious. But I had heard him say that the entire point of the Dungeon of Doom was to come up with characters that were so absurd that no one could absolutely like them at all, just to make sure that Hulk was still getting over.
Well, he never, that was never discussed. He never mentioned that. That sounds maybe a little hokey, maybe a little silly.
I actually heard him say it to somebody.
Wow. Okay. But he told me or whatever, when we were doing the show, we were talking about it. And he said basically whatever Hogan was comfortable with. So they strictly went with like stuff that would have worked in the 80s and the guys that he worked in the 80s and WWF stuff and going Hogan corny because he felt like that was Hogan's like comfort zone. And then eventually he would say, hey, this isn't really working anymore. Let's turn to heel or let's go in a different direction. Let's go a little darker. And then Hogan would agree because the stuff of the Dungeon of Doom was passe. It's old. It's corny. It's hokey. It's not really getting over anymore. So that's kind of like the general direction of where they headed into the NWO.
How did Mr. Sullivan say that? How receptive was Hogan to those early pitches? Because I do know that Sullivan had, they had talked about, man, do we need to turn? Yeah. And Hogan was completely, I don't want to say turned off, but it had to be, all the pieces had to fit perfectly.
He was not ready to turn at that point. Initially, he thought it was a bad idea. He was against it. So when they came back at him with it, they actually thought he was going to deny it again, even though kind of all the facts pointed to like, you need to turn. This is good for the business. It's good for WCW. This will be a huge game changer for us. Just as far as like we're doing okay, but this will really send us off in the stretch where we're making huge money here. It's going to be or business changing. I mean, it's going to really revolutionize wrestling. So he eventually agreed to it, but they actually thought he wasn't going to agree to it because he was so against the idea every time they pitched it.
You talk about those what ifs. What if it doesn't work for me tonight, brother? But of course, Poz, you said business changing. Another iconic moment. It was life changing. The formation of the NWO. And yes, we talked about The Rock and wrestling, what it meant a decade prior when Hulkamania begins to run wild inside of the WWF. We talk about it being catapulted to the front of what's hip in society.
Yes.
As great as that was, this is beyond that. It's even newer heights with the launch of the NWO, creating the Monday Night Wars in the Attitude Era. It really starts that night when he defects.
It's nuts. I mean, you can't even like overstate it enough how the NWO changed the business, created the Attitude Era, created the Monday Night Wars, created Stone Cold Steve Austin, essentially created the heel Vince McMahon character. I mean, created everything successful at WWF. They launched it. They were the reasons. Vince and WWF piggybacked off of the NWO, which changed wrestling, which changed the business. So, yeah, I can't even state how over it was and how popular it was and how mainstream it was and everybody's wearing the shirts and everything else. That just took over wrestling and literally sent it off into the stratosphere where WWF was able to once it slowed down 2 years later, over 2 years later, then WWF capitalized with Austin and McMahon.
All those great runs, those moments. We're going to talk about some of our favorite moments. As it goes here, the NWO, WCW on top. We all know the story of the 83 weeks, and they continue to battle for an extended amount of time there. Unfortunately for WCW, and that story has been retold countless times, the death of WCW, but they do go out of business. I know so many of us as fans, we are eagerly anticipating, oh my God, this opens the doors. WWF bought WCW. This is going to open WWE, buys WCW. This is going to open the door for all these dream scenarios. Everything that we had hoped for during the wars, it could come true. Unfortunately, we get that delayed because a lot of these talents, rightfully so, hey, sit at home, right? You're getting paid by the former owner, AOL Time Warner there, collect that check. It would be some years later before we would see another return of Hulk Hogan to the WWE at this time.
Gotta love it. You needed it. They needed a little bit of boost. The NWO returns. I love the Vince's promo. The NWO is going to kill it. But of course, as we know, WrestleMania 18, Hogan was way too over, way too popular. They loving the nostalgia. They loving the return. They had him turning babyface. But WrestleMania 18, Hogan versus Rock, one of the greatest matches of all time, maybe the greatest WrestleMania match of all time. To me, the most rewatchable match of all time, because that's probably the match I've rewatched the most. Either that or Hogan Andre. I love it when just the crowd is just so into it, and you're literally invested with who wins and loses, not just entertained. You are literally invested, and that's what Hogan brought to the table. I love that return. I love that they brought him back. I even 05 when him and Michaels are feuding and he's beating up Muhammad Hassan. I love that as well.
Another classic moment, but yeah, against the Rock. Hameen was talking about it this past week on the Monday Locker Room. He was there, and I asked him to kind of describe that moment. He said it was so surreal because, going in, it's okay. Hogan is the heel here, but there's just like this undescribable wave that overtakes the entire audience, and they turn in favor. They want their hero, their icon back. He is one of our guys. We know he defected, and we were against him for so long in the Hollywood version, but we want the red and yellow. We want the Hulk up. That big payoff. That's what was so incredible about that moment, and really what we had wanted to see years earlier. Maybe. Was it a little too late, you think, or was it well worth that wait there?
It was, I think, well worth it. That was awesome. One of the best moments, no doubt about it. Pretty cool he was there.
Some other big moments there. He does leave after that run for a little bit of I believe, a payout dispute, but comes back and we get the birth. It was such a fun run this time around with the Mr. America.
Oh, yes. Yes.
There.
It was pretty funny. Good tongue-in-cheek stuff. Good for what it was. We're used to that gimmick, whether it be the Midnight Rider or the Blue Blazer, whoever. Just we love Max gimmicks, even for when it's obvious who the guy is.
Well, it's the case where you can the charisma and use those talents with an aging Hogan to really get him over and connect with that audience and really give that rub to so many of those young talents for a complete new generation and some big matches that people would have been talking. It could have been those what ifs. We got to see those unfold in front of our eyes.
Very true. Very, very true.
So, a great another couple runs there with the company. Would see Hogan come back with appearances, but the Hawkster, he would dabble outside. He had some later life adventures. He would go to some other wrestling companies. Maybe one of the biggest of note is when he once again steps up to the plate and attempts to challenge Vince for another go around when he heads on over to Total Nonstop Action Wrestling.
Funny, I know everybody rips on it. I didn't really mind that run as much as some other people. I know maybe it ended not as good as it started, but there's a couple big rating getters that he got. Big shows. A couple in the 2 millions that he got. So I mean, he did help them for maybe a short period of time. You say a little injection. Maybe they shouldn't have went to Monday nights, but it definitely helped them for a small
Well,
bit of time.
you got to push it because there was a lot of hype. There was a lot of energy. People wanted that competition again. They believed that Hogan, with the team of Bischoff, could do it. I think personally, great intentions. There could have been so much potential there, but maybe not just the eggs in the basket, but the business plan really wasn't intact. They didn't. They were ready for, no pun intended here, the initial impact, but they didn't know the long game.
Yeah, they kind of like blew their load, if you will, right away, and didn't have a long-term goal in mind.
But he did some other things. We had the Hulkamania tour down in
Yes, in Australia.
Australia.
Yep.
He had the Micro Championship Wrestling. He had the wrestling based reality show as well. Hogan's never been. He's never weird away from some maybe over the top business adventures, even with some of the endorsements and things that he's put his name on. So always the ultimate opportunist when it comes to business deals like that. We see he dips his toe in, not dips his toe. They go full in on this thing, and I think this is probably one of the things that he truly regrets. Is this is where a lot of the controversies start? Is the Hogan knows best when they go to the reality television?
Yes, definitely. Huge rating getter. Obviously, kind of set off reality TV for a while, but definitely regrettable in the end. Just obviously, Linda becomes an egomaniac. Obviously, we find out all the problems with Nick and the issues with Brooke and everything else. So yeah, in hindsight, maybe a bit of a mistake,
Well,
although pretty legendary show.
you look at the hardships, the sacrifices for the entire family for this entire run. You look at a guy that's on top. He's doing all the PR, is beloved around the globe. Something's got to give, brother. And that's the family life, unfortunately. And there was probably a lot of strain there. And now they're all being pushed into the spotlight. And you got these networks, these execs promising you, look at what it's doing for Ozzy, who also, God rest his soul here. You look at some of these other families that are hitting it big through reality television. They don't tell you that dark side of it is they're going to expose a lot of your secrets. And it's going to cause a lot of hurt. And it takes a very tough individual. Hulk carried a lot of that on his shoulders, but now that's for the whole family to try to handle that burden. And unfortunately, it didn't seem like that they could. And so they're spread so thin. As you said, some of those demons are exposed, and it just really didn't work out. And this is really where the controversies of Hulk Hogan take center stage and create such a chaos around his life.
100%. Maybe in hindsight, maybe he shouldn't have done it. It's hard to say, but yeah, you want to cash in, but then, yeah, the repercussions of it, the dark side of it, not good.
Well, it's one of those times maybe when he rolled that dice where it didn't necessarily work out for him. But some other business ventures out there. If you're a big time Ultimate fan, I know Poz has been to one location. Got one down there in Florida. They've got one just opened up just a little bit ago in Pigeon
I bet
Forge.
to both, both in Florida, Clearwater and Orlando. Oh yeah.
Okay, so we got the two down there, but of course I'm talking
and Hogan's
about
hangout, and Hogan's hangout,
the beach shop and the hangout. Okay,
yes.
So we got a couple of them that you can check out there. How cool are these things, Poz? You've been to them. I haven't had the opportunity to visit one.
I got to be honest. I'm a huge, obviously Hogan mark, huge Hulkamaniac. They're almost a little scary getting into, just for the fact that there's so much good merchandise that you're afraid that your wallet and your credit cards are going to be gone, and that you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get in trouble at home for that stuff because I literally the last time I went in there, oh my god, I was like, oh, the magnets, shot glasses,
Kid in a candy
T-shirts,
store.
hats, figures. Oh my god, they got the ring, all these cool pictures you can take, all this memorabilia, all these posters. Like legit, I literally looked at almost everything, and I was like, I literally could buy one of everything. It like, and so you could spend thousands of dollars. I didn't go that far, maybe hundreds. Let's put it that way, but you could spend thousands of dollars in there easy. It's just nuts. And like the shirts, every shirt's cool. So like, oh, that cool Hulkamania shirt. Oh, the WCW Hogan shirt. Oh, the NWO. Oh, this NWO shirt. Oh, like I just saw an awesome one when I was in Disney. A guy actually wearing. I didn't know they made it. It's the Bash of the Beach, the green, but it's just Hogan's Beach Shop, Bash of the Beach '96, whatever. I was like, if I saw that one, I would have bought that one at that point. So there is so much. What do you call the tank tops too? It's like holy, there's the hats. There's so much good stuff in there. The figures. Last year, me and my son went. He wanted, which is crazy, he wanted a Hogan figure. He wanted a Rock figure, so they have figures of other wrestlers in there too. So yeah, they got a lot of stuff in there.
Very, very cool. So for all the fans, you can check those out, those 3 locations there on the bucket list for any ultimate Hulkamaniac. Pause now. Let's talk about, let's get a little personal here. As lifelong wrestling fans, of course, the Hulkster has touched our lives in so many ways. Anybody that's a fan or involved in professional wrestling has at least a handful of Hulkamania stories, brother. What are your favorite memories of the Immortal One?
In ring, just want to say WrestleMania 3, WrestleMania 18, WrestleMania 5, just because you're so invested in the Hogan Savage feud. I think it's the greatest feud of all time. Hogan Warrior, even though I hate the ending or hated the ending at that point, it was a cool, obviously great match and passing the torch. That's different story for a different day, but there are so many awesome matches. MSG versus Slaughter, June of 1991, which really should have been the main event of SummerSlam that year. That's different story for a different day, but there's just so many awesome, cool Hogan kind of memories for me. But as far as meeting him, I've met him 5 times. Awesome. There was one time where me and my buddy Vinny, we're near the front of the line. We got a book signed. We got his autograph. He was joking around that we're bigger than the Hardy Boys. We're joking around that why didn't he face Lesnar Survivor Series 02? Why is Big Show on the mat? We were like joking around back and forth. He's messing with us. We leave. We get a camera because there's strictly no cameras allowed. You're not allowed to take pictures. They want to go really quick through the line. So we leave. We come back. We purposely buy another book. We make sure we're last in line. And I literally, as we're walking up, my buddy goes, what if Hulk doesn't remember us from earlier? I was like, oh, what a regret. Why did we come back? We had such a good moment with him. Why would we do that and come back? Jimmy Hart was there too, which just makes it even better. He goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. Again, we're literally the last 2 people in line. He goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. He goes, Jimmy, like joking around. So at first he said we were bigger than the Hardys, but just for like clarification, I guess maybe to get Jimmy's attention, he goes, the Hardy Boys are back. And he's like, what are you guys doing back here? So he remembered us from a couple hours early. We were floored. And he goes, do you guys have a camera? We're like, yeah, we do. But that guy who's running this thing said no pictures. And and the guy goes, Hulk, there's no pictures. And he gave him like a desk there. He goes, these guys bought 2 books each. He goes, they're getting a picture, brother. So he made us, and he goes, Jimmy, get over. And he made Jimmy Hart get in the picture with us too, which was awesome. Like it was so great. And then there was a couple people in wheelchairs, and he goes, and they're getting pictures. So like, what a cool guy, what a nice guy. I was like, man, and every time I met him, there was like he tries to like make it personal. Like he's asking you personal stories. He doesn't just want it to be wham bam, thank you, man. He tries to make it personal. So really awesome to meet him and him to be that cool and remember us, and like just what an awesome guy. And to interview him too. There's another favorite member. That's a bucket list thing. Just unbelievable. I got to interview him.
Yeah, so cool, man. That is an awesome ass story, brother. I can't top that, but it's just, the memories. I wasn't necessarily a Hulkamaniac, and it's certainly not to any levels that you were, Poz. But as you said, man, WrestleMania 3 is what brought me, man. Guys that are our age, that body slam truly was the game changer. But WrestleMania 5, Mega Powers explode. I was so divided at the time. I didn't know which way to go. Poz, I'm going to tell you, man, I had an easier time dealing with my parents' divorce than I had to the Mega Powers exploding. How could I, who was I going to choose?
I love Savage, but I had no problem hating him when he's shooting Hogan. No problem with that.
a year later, the ultimate challenge. I was a little warrior in that moment. That is the time I was in tears thinking that this is it, that warrior can't overcome Hulkamania. It's when my mom told me, the Santa Claus talk. It's okay. You can calm down. It's the
Yes.
fix is in. You're gonna be all right. Of course, the NWO, just how shocked that the world was, all the fans were. One of my favorite moments in WCW, I remember where I was at, is in a room with so many of my friends, and we literally, from sitting on the floor, just straight shoot up, our heads hit the roof when he taps out to the torture rack of Lex Luger, and WCW gets their first big win, a blow in the battle against the NWO. But a personal memory, young RBV, I'm 11, 12 years old, Dayton Nutter Center. It is the first King of the Ring pay-per-view. Bret Hart goes on to win that thing, but at the time, it would be Hulk's last televised match inside of the WWF ring. He takes the loss to Yokozuna for the championship. But as I'm telling you, man, I'm 11, 12 years old, old concrete arena. Hogan's music hit. He makes his way into that arena, and I can still feel it. My legs shaking. That building was shaking to its very core. And to feel the power of Hulkamania like that in professional wrestling was unreal. And one of those moments that I knew I was going to absolutely love this sport, love this genre for the rest of my life. So some great memories there from the Hulkster. The Poz running a little over, but that's okay, because we're talking about the GOAT, the greatest to ever do it, that brought us all to the table. The reason the show is the show globally. But Poz, it is time for the Pop of the Week here on the 10 Count. It is another salute, a celebration as he makes his way to his next great adventure in existence. As Hulkamania will run wild forever.
Nice. Love that. R.I.P. Hulkster.